Welcome back to the Vitamin Mentality podcast. I'm your host, Angel Munro, and we're talking all things health and wellness, looking at ways to live a vital life. Short disclaimer, this is not intended as medical advice. This is just for general purposes only. This week, we're looking at weight management beyond calories in and calories out. If you follow me on Instagram or read any of the articles on my website, you know that I've touched on this topic before. I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive on it today. I think we often blame calories in as the main equation, and there is so much more to it than that. And it's actually, in a way, a lot more simpler than that. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that are affecting our weight management from an environmental perspective, and then we're going to look at some solutions. And yeah, so in the modern day, we've kind of become obsessed with weight management, especially in the last few years, and obsessed about the right diet. We are using, digital wearable technology to track our every single move, track how many calories we're having, track how many steps we're making. We're trying a million diets. We're reducing, certain macronutrients or eliminating whole food groups, and, just are left more confused than ever. And, you see people now, they're counting how much protein they're having every single day for breakfast. And I just think that's crazy. We shouldn't need to do that. We could chase food demons around forever, and it seems to be what happens, and there has to be something else that's going on. Sometimes I see people will say that fruit's bad, or some people will say vegetables are bad, or it's fat that's terrible. It's gotten out of control. So I think that one of the reasons why people have certain beneficial results from following certain restrictive diets is because you generally have to make more food yourself. That's one of the things, and you have to rely less on processed foods. And if you change any macronutrient, like a protein or a carb or a fat, you're going to have some weight loss initially, but it does have an effect on your metabolism overall. And the goal here is weight management over your lifespan, having that homeostasis and metabolic flexibility, and also having joy and vitality as long as possible while you're here on this planet. So I've spoken about wearable technology before in my EMF podcast. I'll just touch on it again. Please watch that. I'll put it in the show notes. But wearing wearable tech like fitness watches, they leach heavy metals, they leach other chemicals that interfere with our endocrine system and our metabolic system. And the EMFs themselves, the electromagnetic frequencies themselves, also affect our hormones and our metabolism. So we are using this technology to try and keep our food intake and our exercise to be on top, be on track, be on top of it, to look after our weight so we can be healthy, but they're actually setting us back. So to me, that's one thing that should definitely be avoided. And one of my biggest issues that I have with that technology, with counting calories and counting our steps and, tracking our sleep, is that we are interrupting our relationship with our intuition. And to me, that is the most erroneous result of using these products for that purpose. Our intuition is so important. There will never be a diet or a fitness program or anything like that that will be the right thing for every single person. We have to rely on our internal intuition, our internal knowing to a certain extent to know what we need as an individual, because we are so different. Our requirements are going to be completely different from person to person. And yeah, saying goodbye to these products, I think, is the first step to reclaiming that intuition, because that's what gets rid of all of the noise about, someone can say fruit's bad, fruit's a demon, and you'll go, I know that that's not what fruit is for me. It just gets rid of that confusion. The other problem is microplastics. They're everywhere. It's said that we consume about a credit card a week, most average people. I'm saying this information not to scare anyone. The more that you kind of aware of what does affect our health and what doesn't, it means that your daily decisions are different. So, I know that microplastics are not good for my hormones, my metabolism, and my health in general. And so I try and buy as many things as I can in jars. I don't try and avoid synthetic fabrics. I go to shops where I can, food shops where I can use paper bags to get my things like rice and legumes and stuff. And, it just changes your behavior. So that's the point about knowing this stuff. You're not going to eliminate it altogether, but the point is that we are nature and our bodies understand nature, and anything that's too separate from its natural form, our body has a hard time with. And it is pretty brilliant, can work out how to get rid of things that it doesn't need and doesn't know. But when it's overburdened, it gets into a point of stress, and that's when disease occurs, when there's an overburden. So it's just about making choices so we don't get to that point. Water, I've mentioned many times before, is quite polluted, tap water. So it's good to filter, or better yet, get spring if you can. And tap water has plastics, pharmaceuticals, particularly metabolites of the oral contraceptive pill that can really mess up our metabolism, pesticides. So filtering is the way to go. Seed oils are things like canola, vegetable, soy, grapeseed, sunflower. It's not because of the plant that they've derived from, it's because of how much processing has occurred, including like heavily processing and bleaching and things, and that wreaks havoc on our body. Lots of people say that they don't eat seed oils when I speak to them, and if you look in their cupboard, there is plenty of seed oils that they're consuming. You have to read labels and go out of your way to find the products and the companies that are not using them. And it's very possible to really reduce them, but it takes a bit of initial effort just working out what things should be avoided. And it is generally a lot of the supermarket, but even a lot of kind of pre-made organic products, like even anything that's pre-made, or even condiments and things, like you have to make a bit of an effort. But there are a lot of great companies now that a lot of people are aware that these oils are really bad and for us, and so lots of companies are using good oils like olive oil and such in their products. So yeah, some interesting statistics around that. Sugar often gets blamed for obesity, diabetes, and even cancer. And if you look at in America in 1935, 22.5% of consumption was sugar, and obesity was around 3%. Diabetes was 0.37%, and metabolic syndrome, so precursor to obesity and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, was virtually unknown use. And then since the 90s, sugar and carbohydrate consumption has been going down. it's decreased rapidly. But the seed oils has gone up, and it was about 7% in the 30s, and in 2016 it was 29%. So this kind of this inverse relationship going on, and all of those diseases that I mentioned are on rapidly on the rise, continue to be on the rise. And it's really important to think people are spending so much more time worrying about their diet and worrying about their exercise now, and these diseases continue to incline, that food is not the problem. Food in its natural form, you follow a few simple rules and you should be able to eat fairly freely. There's a real big difference to, I think a little bit of sugar, organic raw sugar should be fine. There's a really big difference to a cookie that's made at home with organic butter, organic eggs, unbleached flour, and and some raw sugar, than there is to a cookie that you buy from the supermarket that's got vegetable oils, preservatives, all kinds of additives, numbers, seed oils, bleach flour. It's a completely different thing. So people talk about refined food, and white flour and sugar get put into that category, and I agree that people shouldn't be eating these all the time, and when you're kind of in alignment with your diet, you don't feel like them all the time anyway. But the real problem is extreme refinement. So these seed oils and additives and all of those non-pronounceable things that when you look at the back of the packet of even a loaf of bread, it's words that you don't recognize. A loaf of bread from the supermarket. That's the problem, not the wheat. Seasonal eating is really important. We are in line with nature again. I love it when you look at foods, like tomatoes and watermelon and strawberries and things that don't really need to be cooked. They've got protective nutrients in them, protective to the sun when the sun's warmer, and they don't require cooking. And at that time, our kind of internal temperature is warmer. We've got more digestive fire. We can digest these raw foods without any issue. And then as it gets to winter, you start to get root vegetables and things that really require cooking. And it's when we're colder and we don't have that internal digestive fire. We need a little bit of help. We need the cooking. And, we also need things like raw sauerkraut that's been naturally fermented just with salt and the biome from the air. And, you end up with this really nutrient-dense food that's kind of been pre-digested from bacteria, which is supportive to our system. So, and when we're eating seasonal food, it's actually better for our digestion, which is better for our metabolism. And I think that's a really underestimated piece of the puzzle. Our microbiome actually changes to the seasons, which is another indicator that we should be eating seasonally. And our microbiome, when it's working well, everything else, including our metabolism, is working well. We also need to be really focused on when we're eating. I think because of modernity, modern living, we've got lights and everything on in the house at night. And so we stay up later, we eat later, but our body actually runs on this circadian rhythm, and our digestive system also works on this circadian rhythm. Our digestive enzymes and our hormones and our microbiome, they're all functioning really well, ready to take in food during the daytime. And on top of that, lots of people do well eating in a window, like a 10-hour window, rather than eating all the way through. That's kind of been proven in the scientific literature that if we're not having a bit of a fast at night, like a good kind of 14 hours, that's also bad for your metabolism. And it's interesting that generally, there's about 10 hours of, give or take, depending on what season we're in, but there's about a 10-hour window of sunlight. And that's when we should be eating as best as possible. And it gets a little bit hard. I mean, where I'm in winter, it's kind of, it's dark by 5 o'clock at the moment. And I actually be happy to eat at 5 and call it a day from then. But sometimes it's hard to get all your family and everything together by that time. But definitely by like 7 o'clock, we shouldn't be eating anymore. Give your body a chance to wind down. So the digestion is supported, and our metabolism is therefore supported. What else did I want to talk about? It's also really important that we get to sleep a couple of hours before bed, before midnight. So, between 9 and 10 is really good. Melatonin production happens before bedtime. I keep saying before bedtime. Melatonin production happens before midnight, and it protects our mitochondria. More mitochondria we have, better our metabolism is, and when our circadian rhythm is in sync, our metabolism is working better. So, it's often people who do things like shift work, they have a higher chance of obesity because you need sleep to regulate your metabolism. It's also, when it comes to exercise, I think people absolutely need to exercise every day. Maybe that wasn't the case before. But in our modern living, lots of people end up being quite sedentary in their work life, and exercise is the antidote to that. Again, one of the problems that I have with the watches, people get obsessed with counting steps, and they think if they've got a certain amount of steps in the day that means they're okay. But what the requirement of exercise will be for an individual is going to change so much from person to person. And some people are going to need more gentle daily exercise, and some people are going to need to expend more energy. And most people, I think, do well with, half the week, I would say, like high intensity, and then the other half of the week, lower intensity, but doing something every day, even if one of those days is a 10-minute walk. I prioritize exercise outside. It is so important that we get melanin on our skin all the way through the year. That we get sun on our skin so we can produce melanin. It also protects our mitochondria, and it is involved in regulating like dopamine, melatonin, our circadian rhythm, our mood, appetite, sleep, hormones. We need sunlight on our skin beyond vitamin D. So for me, because a lot of my work is inside, I just don't get enough if I'm not exercising outside. And you do need a certain amount of skin exposed. And in the wintertime, unless you're, running or doing something where you're really heating up, you're not actually getting a lot of skin exposure. And that's a really good way to maintain getting a good amount of sun on your skin, is by doing some vigorous exercise outside, even in the winter. I think that we've covered everything that I wanted to touch on. So just looking at some kind of points about what solutions are, even though I've touched on them. We need to stop blaming food, I think, and we need to start focusing on living in the way that nature intended for us to live, and then we'll have a lot less problems with our weight. When I'm looking at my diet, I'm looking at, is it seasonal? Is it local? Is it organic and free of extreme refinement and those words, those non-pronounceable words? And is it something that I feel like eating right now? I think that we should bring our intuition back into it. Sometimes you're going to feel like a bigger meal. Sometimes you're going to feel like a smaller meal. Sometimes you're going to feel like something that's really simple. And we just can start getting away from, we don't need to make sure we got 40 grams of protein every single morning. You might get more protein in your next meal. Like, it's not, we don't need to be so myopic on every single meal. Over the week or over the month, you'll have all different kinds of things that will nurture your body in different ways, in the way that your body needs for that time. And I think that if we're just focusing on those things that I mentioned, seasonal, local, organic, extreme, free from extreme refinement, we're going to be all right. And then that we're moving our body every day. And yeah, so once we've done those things, we can kind of relax a little bit, and we can start focusing on, what's our light environment like? What's our movement like? What are we excluding the toxins? We can focus on joy, and which is really forgotten nutrient for sure. And yeah, it means, like I said in the beginning, we can go back to trusting our intuition, and when we're kind of reorientated in that way, it means that we've got this lovely homeostasis and lovely vitality that we can carry through our life to enjoy it. I did a workshop called the Aligned Diet, and I go into some of the things I talked about with diet in a lot more detail. It is done, it's a video and a workbook that's done in your own time, and then we have a 15-minute session after that, and we drill down to personalize it. And that's done on Zoom, so it can be done anywhere in the world. And I really recommend doing that if you want to just get some clarity on things and free yourself from diet dogma. That is the way to go. As always, thanks so much for listening. Until next time.